Today I'm going to do a review of my cookware system, which includes a 2-burner stove manufactured by Cofiyard, and also my cookware, which is made by Sensarte. When I was trying to figure out what to buy, I knew I wanted a 2-burner stove because of the different types of meals that I prepare. 1 burner just wasn't going to do it for me for many different menu items. And I also wanted it to have reasonably good BTUs so that I'm not waiting around forever when I'm heating something up. And a good footprint is always nice to have, even though I typically car camp. I used to have one of those big Coleman stoves, and it just is heavy and ate up a lot of space. I think these newer modular types of setups are really nice. And as far as the cookware goes, I use cast iron Dutch oven, and I have a cast iron skillet that I use on open flame. But for my everyday cooking on a 2-burner stove, I wanted something that was more like the ceramic type of coating inside, something that cleans really easily. And also I wanted to have some flexibility in types of pots and skillets that I would be able to get. Sometimes I solo camp, and if I'm heating some baked beans, I don't want to do it in a large, oversized pot for just me. If I'm just making eggs for me in the morning, I don't need a 11 or 12-inch skillet for that. But then sometimes I do travel with family and friends, and I might have 4 or 5 people in the group, so I also want to have cookware that'll take care of me for the larger group sizes. I'm not buying for backpacking or the car and truck camping where you have the modular setup and you go off-road types of things. For there, especially with backpacking, but even with the car camping where you're going on overlanding, you do have to be concerned about space. So I understand how some people will be looking from that point of view. But I do think that this setup is pretty modular and pretty small to be able to take care of you for a lot of situations. As I was looking at my stove system and what to buy, I really came down to 2 leading candidates. This one, which I ended up selecting, the Cofiyard 2-burner stove. I also looked at the Jetboil, which is really popular. There's a lot of videos on Jetboil, and a lot of people just really swear by it. Although I never owned one, I did go into an REI a few weeks ago, and I took one out of the box and gave it a good look over, and it looks like a really good quality product. They're both similar in appearance. The Cofiyard is probably a knockoff of the Jetboil. They both have the orange exterior. They're both also available in a gray color. They both are 20,000 BTUs, which is 10,000 on each burner. They both operate on propane, which I wanted. That was one of my main considerations. Propane handles a lot of different weather conditions, altitudes. It's reasonably priced. I connect a propane tank to my 2-burner setup, and you can use the small 1-pound green propane tanks. I bought one here that's a 5-pounder, and I've cooked many meals. I think I filled this thing at the beginning of the year, and here I am 6 months in, and it's still going fine. It's got to be getting close to running out now, but it just, all you have to do is just have it refilled. That's much more environmentally friendly because the small 1-pound green ones you usually throw away after you use them, and I think there is a way to refill some of them, but I prefer not to do that. So this is an investment to buy the extra can there for that, but I am really happy with that decision. I think another thing to talk about is the sensitivity of the knobs here for it. I'm going to show you. These two both operate independently. I could just turn this one on or turn this one on or have them both on at the same time. And I think that's true as well for the Jetboil. Now to turn it on, I just turn it counterclockwise all the way to the end, and then you click, and then that'll turn it on. So let's do that. And then after you've got it on, then you can back it down. And I know it's kind of hard probably to see the flame here in the daytime, but you can see as I'm turning it slowly, you can kind of hear the sound difference as it diminishes in the amount of BTUs that you're putting out there for that. But you can see it. I think it's really good sensitivity. I know from some of the reviews I've seen on the Jetboils, that's one of their big claims to fame, is that they have a super sensitive adjuster. I can't imagine wanting more sensitivity than what I've got here on this. But again, most of the time, I don't see the flame unless I'm going at night. So I'm going off of sound anyway to try to learn where I want to heat things. I mentioned earlier that this has 10,000 BTUs on each side. Every morning I make a pot of coffee, and I use a 1.5 liter And this is not scientific or anything, but the temperature this morning was 57 degrees when I got up at sunrise. So the water was probably about that temperature. I filled this up with 1.5 liters and put it on the burner, and I had it at a maximum setting. And it took about 9 minutes to heat up the water. And so I don't know by comparison whether the jet boil heats any faster than that. I do know they're both 10,000 BTUs, so it's got to be similar for that. But again, for the price difference, even if the jet boil heats a minute faster, that's not a deal breaker for me if I'm making coffee in the morning, whether it takes 9 or 11 minutes or whatever to get my water boiled for that. So anyway, and then to turn it off here, you just have to turn it all the way to the right, and then once it stops, then you know it's off. And so that's how that works. The Cofiyard comes in a small storage bag, has just a tiny amount of padding on the sides. Actually, padding is all around it, and it has a little sleeve on the side for where you can put the regulator piece that goes there. And when it folds up and it goes inside, the regulator piece, I try to put it in the bag so that only the plastic sticks up that could actually scrape against the sides there. You don't want to have the metal sticking up there. So that's just a pro tip for you on that one. The jet boil comes in a similarly sized storage case, although it's a little taller because jet boil, I think you can buy their 2-burner stove as an individual item, but a lot of people, I think especially overlanders, they like the fact that you get a skillet and a pretty good sized pot with it. And the jet boil itself, the 2-burner stove, fits down inside of the big pot, and then the skillet goes over the top. So it's probably about 4 inches or so taller than the Cofiyard is. But if you're going for a larger cookware set like the one that I got, it probably adds another 10 inches or so in height. So the difference there is about 6 inches. Pretty small amount of difference there for the flexibility you get, in my view. Both the jet boil and the Cofiyard come with a rigid connector there with the regulator. If you have your knobs in the front for being able to adjust here on the Cofiyard, the regulator would be on the right. I think it's over on the left on the jet boil, if that matters to anybody. The biggest consideration between the two really comes down to price. I've seen this Cofiyard 2-burner stove on sale recently as low as $59, where you get the 2-burner stove, the regulator, and you get the storage bag. For the jet boil, it's a little more complicated because you can buy with it or without the skillet and the pot. On Amazon a couple of days ago when I was looking at it, they were both right around $350. So of course you'd want to buy the skillet and the pot version of that. But that's a huge difference in price. And then I started getting into why is it so much more expensive? Are there issues where maybe, I could imagine like if this particular one failed after not having it for a very long time, whereas if the jet boil lasts for years and years, that might be a reason to go for a more expensive one beyond the slightly smaller footprint on the jet boil. But I've used this one, only had it for about 6 months, but I've probably cooked almost 200 meals on it, and it still seems to be going fine. My general experience with stoves, I go back to my Coleman days. I have a Coleman stove that's 25 years old and it's still going strong. I mean, these types of things are mainly metal, and then you do have copper pipes or whatever that has the gas flowing through it. And I suppose at some point along the way with any stove, the starters could wear out, but then usually you can still use the stoves by just lighting the burners manually with a lighter. But so far on this one, it's been doing great. So for me, that makes me feel better about the decision that I made for the much more inexpensive product. The Cofiyard weighs 4.5 pounds, and I think that includes the 2-burner stove and the regulator in the bag. And the jet boil is 6.1 pounds, and that's without the pot and the skillet, but I think that includes its regulator and its bag in that weight. So it's a little bit heavier, and I have to say when I picked up the jet boil at the store, it did feel very substantial, very solid product. But by contrast, the Cofiyard, to me, if I had never picked up the Jetboil, I would say the Cofiyard felt very substantial, not by any means flimsy in the way it comes off. So I'm not sure that you need the heavier steel and that sort of thing, but it is a nice quality product from what I can see looking at the Jetboil. The next thing to talk about, which is a consideration for me, is the distance between the two burners, because that affects how big of a skillet or a pot can you use. Now the Jetboil is designed, I think they give you a 10-inch skillet, and also the way it fits in the bag, and I'm going to show you here on this one anyway. When you fold it up, you put the two burners together and then fold it over, and you can see this that comes out. That's the connection. It has the place where the gas goes through so that you can operate these two things individually. And so this sticks out a little bit because it's going to go into that square bag, and there's a little bit of extra space for that. With the Jetboil, I noticed it's this in-between piece here is much shorter, because when it folds up, they have to make sure it can fit inside of that large pot that they give you in their system setup. So that does bring the two center points of the burners closer together with the Jetboil. And I'll show you here with this is an 11-inch skillet, my cast iron skillet. And let's take the tang out of the way here, but you can see you could probably easily go as much as a 12-inch skillet. You could actually have two probably 12-inch skillets going here. And not that I ever do that very often, but I could if I had a large group and I'm cooking bacon, I'm cooking eggs maybe over on the other side, and I want to have two large skillets. I have that flexibility with this product. With the Jetboil, you're kind of buying into the idea of, I want to stay compact. I'm going to use my 10-inch skillet and the large pot that they give you for that. And then by having that, using those two products, that now, though I am making it into a tinier footprint, and it fits in that nice little bag and all that. So nothing wrong with going in that direction, but that's it's probably two different purposes. This maybe is more car camping, the other might be more overlanding. Also want to mention at this point, I think as I was reading the marketing info on the Jetboil, the pot and the skillet that come with it are ceramic inside, and I'm going to show you my Sensarte setup in a few minutes. And that's also ceramic, which I'm a big fan of. I don't like the old Teflons. They can flake, and you have to be so careful with them over time. And then, of course, those flakes, the Teflon flakes, I think are known to be cancer producing and all that. So I think the ceramic, if you take care of it, is the way to go. As for wind, any type of an outdoor setup like this can be affected if there's good winds going on. So if you live in an area where there's a lot of wind, that is something that you'll want to take care of. With mine, it doesn't come with any protection for that. So I bought on Amazon, I think it was $8 or $9, but it's a kind of a little aluminum windshield that I can put around both of these products here for that. So that's the way I dealt with that. With the Jetboil system, they give you a clear plastic kind of a thing that wraps around, and I think it has tangs that tie into the bottom of the cook stove. So, and it only goes up maybe about this high. But I think that's supposed to give you some protection there. And then the pot that they give you, it looks like it fits down over the grill or the grate, and it has like a built-in thing that is supposed to spread the heat and give you more of an even flow there. So I don't have a lot of experience with that type of a product, but that might be a nice thing on the Jetboil. Cofiyard does also sell a cookware system. I think it's about $30, so it would take you from the sale price of $59 up to about $89 if you wanted to get that as well. And that gives you a skillet and a pot with a lid, and also inside of the pot they give you a little kettle for heating water, but that doesn't integrate into the bag in any way, so you would have two separate items. Okay, so there's a griddle here for cooking meat or something where it has a drainage. They give you nice felt things that you can put in between each of the products. This is a high-sided skillet for maybe making a stew or spaghetti or something, and they give you a top here that can be heated for that. And then the next level down is, looks like a 10-inch skillet, which has a pretty good high side to it. And the same top can also work on that product as well. Then there's the next size skillet down, which I typically use if I'm making eggs or something in the morning. It's just me there for that. And then you get 2 bowls. This is the larger one. And there's a top that goes with it. And this top, and I'm going to show you this top as well too. These are not designed to be heated. They're more for like if you have leftovers at the end and you need to put them in your cooler, you can do that. So then here's the smaller one that I would use for if it's just like a single side thing for me, like if I'm making baked beans or something on the side. And then of course if I don't finish, I can use this and put it in the cooler. I do like the flexibility of having smaller ones, because if I imagine I'm by myself and I'm making that side of baked beans, I don't really want to stick that in a large pot. So that goes there. And we got these things. And I usually, in my container, I have a larger container that I keep this in along with other things. And you can see the overall footprint of it. It's pretty cool the way it all stacks together. And of course you still have these 2 things too that will go there. And it's ceramic, as I mentioned earlier, which is really nice. But again, with this type of cookware, if you want to have it last a long time, never use any metallic types of utensils for stirring or spatulas or anything. You always want to use wood or plastic with this so that it'll last as long as possible. I've had this set up for about 6 months so far, and I probably cooked at least maybe 30 or 40 meals with each one of these different pots, and it seems to be holding up really well. And I think it's available. I got the black color, but I think it has like 6 different color options for doing it. And it's on sale. I've seen it as low as $69. Usually it's $79 or $89 for the whole setup, which I think is an amazing deal for that. So I think for the type of camping that I usually do, where I'm at a campsite, this is an ideal setup for me because I have my 2 burners and I have great flexibility as far as the cookware goes. And I think it's all a pretty reasonably sized setup. The Jetboil system, which I brought up earlier, looks like a fantastic product. I'm just taken aback the $350 price. So I don't want to try to dissuade anyone from going in the Jetboil direction. But for me, that price tag is just way, way too high for something that I would want to consider. This was, I think I spent $69, say $70 on this, probably about $70 on this, plus the windscreen that I had to buy, say $10. So, I'm about $150 for the whole thing here, which is less than half price over the Jetboil. I think the quality on both of these is fantastic, and I think it'll last a long time. This is how I store my cooking system. Over on the left is the 2-burner stove in its container, and on the right is the full Sensarte pots and pans setup. And then I have plenty of room over on the right side for storing other things, and I keep my 2 little handles for my cooking set in a felt container there so they don't scratch. And I also have a little container here with all of my plastic and wooden utensils that I use for cooking, and I keep that up here as well. And I could put other things in here, but that's a pretty good setup. I didn't mention it earlier, but I don't have any relationship with either Cofiyard or Sensarte. I just did some research and decided to upgrade my systems, and these are just the ones that I came to, and I thought I'd just share my experience. Number one, with how I researched and came about with my decision, but also the overall quality experience that I've been having after using them for about 6 months. And so everybody has unique considerations for how they want to purchase what they're going to use on their camping trips. And so I'm not telling you to go in my direction, but if you're similar to me, this might be something you'll enjoy doing. And if you like the content on my channel, please press the like button and consider subscribing so that you can keep up with future episodes. And I'll see you on the next one.